The morning sky above Serenity Prime burned with an unnatural orange glow. Veltar pressed his thin, scaled hands against the window of the council chamber and watched as streaks of fire fell from the heavens. Each streak was a Vexthul warship descending to finish what they had started 3 days ago. "They're coming back," whispered Zixona, her young voice trembling as she clutched a datapad containing evacuation reports. The numbers were grim. Of the 12 million Kethmari who had lived in the capital city of New Haven, fewer than 50,000 remained alive in the underground shelters. Veltar turned away from the window. His people had always been farmers and artists, not warriors. Their greatest achievement was creating perfect harmony between nature and technology. Their cities grew like living gardens. Their spacecraft moved like gentle winds through space. Now their world was dying, and they had no way to fight back. "Have the other colonies responded to our calls?" Veltar asked, though he already knew the answer from the sadness in Zixona's large violet eyes. Kepler's rest fell yesterday. The mining stations in the outer rim went silent this morning. She looked down at her datapad. "We received one last message from Colony 7 before their transmitter was destroyed. The Vexthul aren't taking prisoners anymore. They're killing everyone." The ground shook as another bombardment struck the surface above them. Dust fell from the ceiling of the underground bunker that had become their final sanctuary. Children cried in their mothers' arms while the elders sat in silent meditation, preparing their souls for the journey to whatever came after life. Veltar had lived for over 300 years. He had seen his people spread across dozens of worlds, building peaceful societies that welcomed refugees from wars in distant systems. The Kethmari had never refused aid to those who needed it. They had shared their technology freely and asked for nothing in return except friendship. Now they were paying the price for their kindness. The Vexthul Empire had come to their space not as conquerors seeking slaves or resources, but as exterminators. The aliens had declared the Kethmari inefficient and marked them for complete removal from the galaxy. "Elder Veltar," said a young technician named Mordak as he rushed into the chamber. "The Vexthul have broken through the northern defense grid. Their ground forces will reach the main shelter in less than an hour." Veltar closed his eyes and felt the weight of his people's fate pressing down on him. He had failed them. As the senior diplomat of their species, he had tried everything he could think of. He had sent messages to every spacefaring civilization they had ever contacted, begging for help. Most had not replied. Those who did respond sent messages of sympathy and regret, explaining that the Vexthul Empire was too powerful to fight. The Galactic Council had refused to act, claiming that intervention in local conflicts was beyond their mandate. The Trade Federation had quietly closed all shipping routes to Kethmari space. Even the Zenthran Republic, whose colonies the Kethmari had helped establish, had turned their backs and sealed their borders. "Is the deep space beacon ready?" Veltar asked. Zixona nodded. "The signal is prepared, but Elder, we don't know if anyone will hear it. The beacon will broadcast on frequencies that no known species uses. We're literally calling out into the void, hoping that someone somewhere might be listening." "What does the message say?" The young engineer activated her datapad and read aloud. "To any who hear this cry across the darkness of space, we are the Kethmari and we are dying. Our people have lived in peace for 1,000 years, harming none and helping many. Now we face extinction at the hands of those who see no value in life unlike their own. If there are any among the stars who believe that genocide is wrong, we beg you to remember us. Do not let our voices be silenced forever." Veltar felt tears running down his scaled cheeks. "Send it." Millions of light years away, Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison was finishing his third cup of coffee and his second consecutive 12-hour shift at Deep Space Monitoring Station Bravo. The facility orbited Neptune, far from Earth's busy inner system, listening for signs of intelligent life among the stars. For 15 years, Jake had been part of humanity's search for extraterrestrial intelligence program. They had found plenty of evidence that life existed throughout the galaxy, but no proof of advanced civilizations. Radio signals, exotic energy readings, and unexplained gravitational anomalies suggested that Earth was not alone. But first contact remained frustratingly out of reach. "Jake, you need to see this," called Dr. Lisa Grant from her workstation across the monitoring room. Lisa was the station's xenolinguistics expert, a brilliant woman who had spent her career developing translation protocols for languages that might not even exist. Jake walked over to her station and looked at the display. What am I looking at? A signal from the Kepler 442 system. It came in about 20 minutes ago on a frequency band we've never monitored before. Lisa's fingers moved across her keyboard, bringing up spectral analysis charts and wave pattern diagrams. Jake, this is definitely artificial. Someone sent this deliberately. Can you translate it? Lisa nodded, her face pale with excitement and something that looked like fear. The signal includes its own translation matrix. Whoever sent this wanted to make sure we could understand it. She pressed a button, and speakers throughout the monitoring station filled with an alien voice speaking perfect English. The message was short, but devastating. As the alien voice described systematic genocide, Jake felt his hands clenching into fists. By the time the message ended with its desperate plea for help, every person in the monitoring station was silent. Play it again, Jake said quietly. Lisa hesitated. Jake, if this is real, play it again. They listened to the message 3 more times. Each time the words hit harder. An entire species was being murdered, and their final act was to call out to the universe, hoping that someone would care enough to remember them. Jake picked up the secure communication device that connected the monitoring station directly to Fleet Command on Earth. This is Lieutenant Commander Morrison. At Deep Space Bravo, I need to speak with Admiral Clark immediately. Sir, the Admiral is in a budget meeting with the Senate Defense Committee. Can this wait until... No, it cannot wait. Tell him we have received our first confirmed communication from an extraterrestrial intelligence, and they're asking for our help. 20 minutes later, Admiral Henry Clark's face appeared on the main screen of the monitoring station. The Admiral was a tall, gray-haired man who had commanded Earth's space forces for over a decade. His expression was serious as he listened to the alien message. How long ago was this sent? Clark asked. Lisa checked her calculations. The signal originated approximately 4 months ago, sir. Given the distance and the speed of light, they might already be dead. Clark finished grimly. He was quiet for a long moment, then asked, What's the status of our deep space fleet? The Retribution Battle Group is completing shakedown trials near Mars. The new ships are ready for deployment, but sir, we don't even know if we can reach their location. The Kepler 442 system is over 1,200 light-years away. Clark nodded. Dr. Grant, how confident are you that this message is genuine? Sir, the linguistic patterns, the technological signature of the transmission, the mathematical constants included in the translation matrix. This is real. An alien species sent us a distress call. The Admiral was silent for another minute. Jake could imagine the thoughts running through the man's mind. Humanity had just made first contact with an alien species, and that species was begging for help against genocide. The political implications were staggering. Earth's governments were not unified on space policy. Many nations opposed military expansion beyond the solar system. Sir, Jake said quietly, with respect, this isn't a political decision anymore. Someone out there is dying and they asked us for help. Admiral Clark's jaw tightened. Lieutenant Commander Morrison, you're absolutely right. Dr. Grant, I want a full analysis of everything we can determine about these aliens and their attackers. I'm authorizing immediate deployment of the Retribution Battle Group under my direct command. Sir, the politicians will want a say in this, Lisa warned. Clark's smile was cold. The politicians can debate all they want after we're already in hyperspace. Sometimes you have to ask for forgiveness instead of permission. He leaned forward on the screen. Jake, I want you and Dr. Grant aboard the Retribution in 6 hours. We're going to make first contact, and we're going to need the people who received their message. As the communication ended, Jake looked at Lisa. Are we really about to start humanity's first interstellar war? Lisa was staring at her translation of the alien message. Jake, I've spent my whole career dreaming about meeting aliens. I never imagined our first contact would be with victims of genocide calling for help. Jake thought about the desperation he had heard in the alien voice, the dignity maintained even in the face of extinction. Maybe this is exactly how it was supposed to happen. Maybe this is who we're supposed to be. 4 hours later, Captain Steve Williams stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution and watched as the most powerful warships humanity had ever built prepared for their first mission beyond the solar system. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kethmari system, and Captain Steve Williams felt his heart sink at what he saw on the main display. Where the navigation charts showed 3 inhabited planets, only dead rocks remained. The worlds that had once been home to millions of peaceful aliens were now scorched wastelands, their atmospheres poisoned and their surfaces cracked from orbital bombardment. "My God," whispered Dr. Lisa Grant from her station on the bridge. "We're too late." Admiral Clark's voice came through the communication system from the flagship. "All ships maintain formation and scan for survivors. Captain Williams, take your ship to the third planet. Intelligence suggests it was their capital world." Williams guided the Retribution toward what had once been called Serenity Prime. As they approached the dead planet, the ship's sensors began picking up faint energy readings from beneath the surface. "Captain," called Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison, who had been assigned as the ship's alien contact specialist, "I'm detecting power sources in underground locations. Someone might still be alive down there." "Prepare a landing party," Williams ordered. "I want Marines, medical personnel, and our translation equipment. If anyone survived this massacre, we're going to find them." 2 hours later, Marine Sergeant Tony Rodriguez led a squad of heavily armed soldiers through the ruins of what had once been a beautiful city. The buildings had been made from some kind of living coral that grew in perfect spirals toward the sky. Now they were blackened stumps poking up from glass that had melted and reformed when the Vexthul weapon struck. Dr. Amy Foster, the expedition's medical officer, carried portable sensors that could detect life signs through solid rock. "Tony, I'm picking up heartbeats about 50 meters down. There's definitely someone alive in those tunnels." Rodriguez activated his radio. "Captain Williams, we've found survivors. Requesting excavation equipment at coordinates 77 Alpha." It took the human engineering crew 6 hours to cut through the collapsed debris and reach the underground shelter. When they finally broke through the last barrier, Rodriguez found himself staring at dozens of alien faces pressed against a transparent wall. The Katamari were beautiful in a way that made Rodriguez think of ancient dragons from Earth legends. They had scales that shifted color from deep blue to silver, large eyes that seemed to hold centuries of wisdom, and graceful movements that reminded him of dancers. Right now, those eyes were filled with terror as they stared at the armed humans. "Easy," Rodriguez said, lowering his weapon and removing his helmet. "We're here to help." Dr. Foster activated the translation device that Dr. Grant had prepared during the journey. The machine analyzed the alien language patterns and converted them to English in real time. An elderly Katamari stepped forward. His scales had faded to a pale silver, and he moved with the careful dignity of someone who had lived through unimaginable loss. "Are you the Vexthul?" the alien asked in a voice that the translator rendered as cultured and deeply sad. "No," Rodriguez replied. "We're humans. We received your message and came to help." The alien's eyes widened with something that might have been hope. "Humans? I am Veltar, speaker for the Kathmari people, or what remains of us." He gestured to the crowded shelter behind him. "These are the last of our kind in this system. Perhaps the last anywhere." Dr. Foster stepped forward with her medical scanner. "How many of you are there? Are you hurt? Do you need food or medicine?" Veltar watched the scanner with curiosity rather than fear. "We are 312 souls in this shelter. There are other shelters, but we lost contact with them days ago. We have food for perhaps another week." Rodriguez activated his radio again. "Captain, we have 300 survivors here, and there might be more in other locations. They need immediate evacuation." Captain Williams's voice crackled back. "Understood." "How are they responding to contact?" Rodriguez looked at the aliens who were now emerging from their shelter with careful hope. Children clung to their parents while adults stared at the humans with expressions of wonder and disbelief. "They're scared but cooperative, sir. They can't believe someone actually came to help them." Over the next several hours, human rescue teams located 4 more underground shelters scattered across the ruined planet. Each shelter held between 50 and 400 Kathmari survivors, all of them half-starved and traumatized by watching their civilization die. Dr. Kevin Park, the fleet's linguistic expert, worked with Veltar to establish better communication protocols. As the translation systems improved, the full horror of what had happened became clear. The Vexthul came without warning, Veltar explained to Admiral Clark during a briefing aboard the flagship. They demanded our immediate surrender and offered us slavery as an alternative to death. When we asked for time to consider their terms, they began destroying our cities. "How long did the attack last?" Clark asked. 18 days, Veltar replied. 18 days of continuous bombardment. They targeted our schools first, then our hospitals, then our cultural centers. They wanted to break our spirit before they killed our bodies. Dr. Grant leaned forward. Did they give any reason for the attack? Did they want your resources, your territory? Veltar's scales shifted to a darker blue, which the humans had learned indicated deep sadness. They said we were inefficient. Our way of life did not serve the Empire's needs. We grew food instead of weapons. We wrote poetry instead of building war machines. They declared our entire species a waste of space and resources. Admiral Clark was quiet for a long moment. How many of your people lived in this system? 12 million on Serenity Prime alone. Perhaps 30 million total across all our worlds. And how many survivors have we found so far? Slightly over 2,000, reported Captain Williams. The mathematics were horrifying. The Vex-Thule had murdered over 99.9% of the Cathmari population in this system alone. Are there other Cathmari colonies? Clark asked. Other survivors? Veltar nodded. We had settlements in 7 other systems, but we lost contact with all of them over the past 6 months. The Vex-Thule work methodically. They finish with one system before moving to the next. Commander Rachel Stone, captain of the UES Vengeance, had been listening to the briefing from her ship. Her voice came through the communication system with barely controlled anger. Admiral, request permission to conduct reconnaissance of the other Cathmari systems. If there are survivors, we need to find them before it's too late. Granted, Clark replied. Take a fast squadron and check each system. But be careful. We don't know what kind of forces we're dealing with yet. As the human fleet began rescue operations, they learned more about their enemy. The Cathmari had kept detailed records of the Vex-Thule attacks, and their observations painted a picture of an empire that had perfected the art of genocide. Major Danny Cruz, one of the fleet's fighter pilots, studied the tactical data while his squadron escorted evacuation ships. These guys are efficient, he told his wingman over the radio. They use automated weapons platforms for the orbital bombardment, then send in ground troops to clean up survivors. No wasted effort, no unnecessary risks. Sounds like they've done this before, replied Lieutenant Sarah Kim. According to the aliens, they've been doing it for centuries. The Vex-Thule conquered most of this part of the galaxy by exterminating anyone who wouldn't submit completely to their empire. Chief Warrant Officer Maria Santos, the fleet's senior engineer, was working with Cathmari technicians to understand their equipment. She was amazed by the sophistication of their technology, but also frustrated by their complete lack of weapons. They've got power systems that are centuries ahead of ours, she reported to Admiral Clark. Their medical technology can regrow entire organs. Their environmental systems turn their planets into perfect gardens, but they don't have a single weapon more dangerous than a farming tool. They were pacifists, Clark asked. More than that. They seemed to think that violence was a mental illness that intelligent species would eventually cure. They couldn't understand why anyone would choose war when cooperation was so much more efficient. The Admiral shook his head. They were wrong about that. Commander Stone's reconnaissance squadron returned after 3 days with devastating news. 2 more Cathmari systems had been completely sterilized with no survivors found. But at the mining colony of Kepler's Rest, they had discovered something that changed everything. Admiral, Stone reported from her ship's bridge, we found active Vex-Thule forces at Kepler's Rest. They're not just destroying the colony. They're using the surviving Cathmari as slave labor in the mines. How many survivors? Clark asked. Approximately 5,000, but sir, that's not the important part. We intercepted Vex-Thule communications. They're planning to move against something they call the Sol system within the next few months. They've identified Earth as a potential threat. The bridge of the flagship went silent. Dr. Grant was the first to speak. They know about us? Apparently our hyperspace jumps created energy signatures that their sensors detected, Stone continued. They're classifying humanity as a developing, aggressive species that needs to be eliminated before we become a problem. Admiral Clark stood up slowly. So they're planning to do to Earth what they did here. Admiral Clark stood in the war room aboard the flagship, staring at a holographic map of the local star systems. Red markers showed confirmed Vex-Thule positions, while blue dots represented human ships scattered across 3 systems. The numbers were not encouraging. Intelligence reports suggest the Vex-Thule have divided their forces, reported Commander Samuel Torres, the fleet's intelligence officer. They've got approximately 60 ships guarding the mining operations at Kepler's Rest, and another 140 ships assembling in the Rigel system for the assault on Earth. Dr. Lisa Grant looked up from her analysis of captured Vexthul communications. Sam, their fleet doctrine is interesting. They rely heavily on automated systems and predictable formations. It's like they've never faced an enemy that fights back effectively. Makes sense, said Captain Steve Williams. If you've been committing genocide for centuries, you probably don't develop tactics for fighting equals. You just need enough firepower to destroy defenseless targets. Admiral Clark nodded thoughtfully, which gives us an advantage they won't expect. They're prepared to fight a conventional war against a weaker opponent. They're not prepared to fight humans. The door to the war room opened, and Veltar entered with a young Kethmari engineer named Zixona. The aliens had become valuable advisors, sharing everything they knew about Vexthul technology and tactics. Admiral, Veltar said through the translation device, Zixona has information about the mining operations at Kepler's Rest that might be useful. The young alien stepped forward nervously. Her scales shifted from blue to green as she spoke, indicating anxiety. The Vexthul are forcing our people to extract rare metals from the asteroid belt, but they're using our own mining equipment to do it. If someone could disable the gravity generators that hold the asteroids in stable orbits, the entire mining operation would collapse into chaos, finished Commander Torres, understanding immediately. Brilliant. How many ships would they need to guard a disaster area? More importantly, added Captain Williams, how many ships would they have to pull away from other operations to deal with the emergency? Admiral Clark smiled grimly. Gentlemen, lady, we're going to give the Vexthul Empire their first lesson in human warfare. We don't just fight battles. We fight entire campaigns. 3 days later, Colonel Frank Turner crouched in the asteroid field near Kepler's Rest, watching Vexthul patrol ships move through their predictable routes. His Marines were hidden in hollowed-out asteroids, waiting for the signal to begin humanity's first offensive operation against an alien enemy. Bravo, team. Report, Turner whispered into his radio. In position, sir, replied Sergeant Ryan Kelly. Demolition charges are placed on the primary gravity generators. When these things blow, this whole asteroid field is going to become a shooting gallery. Charlie team, ready, sir, came the voice of Lieutenant Patricia Gomez. We've got eyes on the Vexthul command post. Once the fireworks start, we can take out their communications array. Turner checked his watch. In exactly 12 minutes, Major Danny Cruz would lead his fighter squadron in a diversionary attack on the other side of the system. The Vexthul would send their mobile forces to intercept, leaving the mining operation lightly defended. All teams, stand by for Operation Hammerfall. Aboard the UES Vengeance, Commander Rachel Stone watched her tactical display as Cruz's fighters engaged the Vexthul patrol fleet. The alien ships responded exactly as predicted, racing to intercept what they assumed was a desperate attack by an inferior force. Danny's giving them a good show, reported her weapons officer. The Vexthul are committing their entire mobile reserve to chase down his squadron. Stone smiled coldly. Perfect. Signal Colonel Turner. Tell him the stage is set. In the asteroid field, Turner activated his radio. All teams execute, execute, execute. The first explosions turned 3 massive asteroids into clouds of spinning debris. The gravity generators that kept the mining operation stable overloaded and failed, in a cascade reaction that spread throughout the entire field. Sergeant, Kelly's demolition charges had been placed with surgical precision. Instead of simply destroying the Vexthul equipment, the explosions created a chain reaction that turned the asteroids themselves into weapons. Chunks of rock the size of buildings began spinning out of control, smashing into Vexthul ships and installations. Holy shit. Kelly breathed as he watched a 2-kilometer-wide asteroid slam into a Vexthul battleship. Did you see that? Language, Sergeant, Turner replied, but he was grinning inside his helmet. Charlie team, take out their communications. I want them blind and deaf. Lieutenant Gomez led her squad in a lightning assault on the Vexthul command post. The aliens were so focused on the chaos in the asteroid field that they never saw the humans coming. Within minutes, their entire communication network was down. But the real surprise came when the human forces began their extraction of Kethmari prisoners. Instead of simply evacuating the slaves, the Marines started arming them with captured Vexthul weapons. Are you insane? Demanded a Vexthul officer who had been taken prisoner. Those creatures are pacifists. They don't know how to fight. Colonel Turner looked at the alien through his helmet's faceplate. You're right. They don't know how to fight, but they know how to hate, and we're very good teachers. The newly armed Kethmari proved to be quick learners. Driven by rage over the destruction of their people, they fought with a desperate fury that shocked their former captors. More importantly, they knew exactly where to hit the Vexthul installations to cause maximum damage. The slave barracks are built on top of the main power plant, explained one freed Kethmari to Sergeant Kelly. If you can overload the containment field, Kelly grinned and pulled out another demolition charge. I like the way you think. The battle at Kepler's Rest lasted 6 hours and ended with the complete destruction of the Vexthul mining operation. More importantly, it rescued over 5,000 Kethmari slaves and captured intact examples of advanced Vexthul technology. But the real victory was psychological. For the first time in their imperial history, the Vexthul had lost an entire operation to what they considered primitive beings. General Korathak stood in his command center in the Rigel system, staring at reports from Kepler's Rest with growing disbelief. The humans had not simply attacked his forces. They had turned his own weapons against him and recruited his slaves to fight alongside them. How many ships did we lose? He asked his aide. 47 vessels destroyed, General. 13 more severely damaged. The entire mining operation is a total loss. Korathak's forearms twitched with suppressed rage. And the humans? Intelligence suggests they lost perhaps 6 small craft. The majority of their force escaped intact. Impossible. Our ships are superior in every way. Our weapons are more advanced. Our tactics have conquered half the galaxy. The aide hesitated before speaking. General, the humans don't fight like any species we've encountered before. They use unpredictable methods. Korathak turned to study the tactical display. Explain. They turned the asteroid field itself into a weapon. They armed the slaves and used them as additional fighters. They attacked our communications first, then created chaos before striking our main force. It's as if they think of war as art instead of science. The general was quiet for several minutes. The Vexthul Empire had conquered hundreds of species over the centuries. Each conquest had followed the same pattern. Demonstrate overwhelming force, demand surrender, exterminate those who refused to submit. It was efficient, predictable, and had never failed, until now. Double the patrols around our fleet anchorage, Korathak ordered, and send a message to the Supreme Overlord. Tell him we may need additional ships for the assault on the Sol system. How many additional ships, General? Korathak looked at the reports from Kepler's Rest again. 47 ships destroyed by an enemy force that should have been swept aside easily. All of them. Send every available ship in the Empire. Meanwhile, aboard the human flagship, Admiral Clark was reviewing combat footage with his senior officers. The attack on Kepler's Rest had been more successful than anyone had dared hope. Casualties? Clark asked. Remarkably light, reported Captain Williams. We lost 2 fighters and had 17 wounded. No fatalities. Dr. Amy Foster looked up from her medical reports. The freed Kethmari are responding well to treatment. More importantly, they're asking to join our forces. They want to fight, can they? Asked Commander Stone. I mean, are they physically capable of combat? Veltar, who had been observing the briefing, spoke up. Commander, my people have never been warriors, but we are intelligent and we learn quickly. The humans have shown us that violence can serve justice. We wish to learn this lesson well. Admiral Clark nodded slowly. Very well. Dr. Grant, I want you to work with our new allies on developing combined tactics. If the Kethmari want to fight, we'll teach them how. What about the Vexthul response? Asked Torres. They're bound to reinforce their fleet after what happened at Kepler's Rest. Clark studied the holographic display showing enemy fleet positions. Good. Let them bring every ship they have. The more forces they commit to this system, the fewer ships they'll have available for other operations. Captain Williams understood immediately. The Vexthul Empire's response to the disaster at Kepler's Rest was swift and overwhelming. Within 2 weeks, over 300 alien warships had gathered in the Rigel system, the largest fleet the Empire had assembled in over a century. General Korathak stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, and felt confident that this time there would be no surprises. All fleet commanders report ready for hyperspace jump, announced his communications officer. Destination Sol system. Estimated arrival in 72 hours. Korathak nodded with satisfaction. The humans had proven more troublesome than expected, but they were still primitives with inferior technology. 300 ships would be more than enough to reduce their homeworld to ash and end this irritating resistance. Execute jump, he ordered. What Korthak did not know was that Captain Lucy, Chen of the stealth ship UES Nightfall, had been watching his fleet for the past 10 days. Her ship was invisible to Vexthul sensors, hidden in the shadow of a gas giant, while she recorded every detail of their fleet composition and battle plans. Admiral Clark, Chen reported over quantum communication, the entire Vexthul fleet just departed for Earth. 300 ships, including their flagship and what looks like their entire high command. Understood, Clark replied from his position near the edge of the system. Are you certain they all left? Yes, sir. The Rigel system is now defended by automated orbital platforms only. No ships, no mobile forces. Admiral Clark activated the fleet communication system. All ships, this is Clark. The Vexthul have taken the bait. Operation Thunderstrike is now active. Captain Williams, take your battle group and hit their shipyards. Commander Stone, your target is their fuel depot. I want everything that can build or supply their fleet turned into scrap metal. The human counterattack began immediately. While the Vexthul fleet raced toward Earth, human forces struck at the heart of their empire's military infrastructure. Captain Williams led the UES Retribution and 6 other warships in a devastating assault on the main Vexthul shipyard complex. The orbital facilities had been designed to resist attacks from other Vexthul forces using conventional tactics. They were not prepared for humans who fought without rules. Target the construction docks first, Williams ordered. I want those half-built ships destroyed before they can launch. The human attack was surgical and brutal. Instead of engaging the defensive platforms directly, Williams's ships fired through the shipyard structures themselves, using the Vexthul's own construction equipment as cover, while destroying everything that could not fight back. Major Danny Cruz led his fighter squadrons through the shipyard's superstructure, hunting down automated repair systems and construction robots. This is like shooting fish in a barrel, he reported. These guys never expected anyone to attack their support infrastructure. Stay focused, Williams warned. We've got 15 minutes before their reserve forces arrive. But the reserves never came. The Vexthul had committed every mobile unit to the attack on Earth, leaving their industrial centers defended only by static platforms that could not adapt to human tactics. Commander Stone's assault on the fuel depot was even more devastating. The Vexthul stored their fleet's energy supplies in massive orbital tanks that stretched for kilometers through space. Stone's ships didn't even try to fight the defensive platforms. Instead, they simply ignited the fuel. All ships emergency jump, Stone ordered as the first storage tank exploded. This is going to be bigger than we thought. The chain reaction that followed could be seen from 3 star systems away. When it finally ended, the Vexthul Empire had lost enough fuel to supply their entire fleet for 6 months. But the most important attack was carried out by Colonel Frank Turner and his Marines. While the fleet struck at military targets, Turner led a precision assault on the Vexthul Intelligence Center on the planet Dominion Prime. Remember, Turner told his troops as they prepared to land, we're not here to conquer this planet. We're here to steal their playbook. The Vexthul had never faced a ground assault on one of their core worlds. Their planetary defenses were designed to repel orbital bombardment, not small units of highly trained soldiers who could think and adapt. Sergeant Ryan Kelly led the demolition team through the capital city's underground tunnels. Colonel, these aliens never heard of guerrilla warfare. Their security is all about stopping big attacks, not infiltration. Turner's Marines moved through the city like ghosts, avoiding major confrontations while striking at carefully chosen targets. Their goal was not destruction, but information. Lieutenant Patricia Gomez led the assault on the Central Intelligence Complex. We're in, she reported. The Vexthul are trying to respond, but they don't know how to fight an enemy they can't see. The Marines held the intelligence center for exactly 47 minutes. In that time, they downloaded the complete records of the Vexthul Empire's military operations for the past 50 years. Fleet positions, supply routes, communication codes, and most importantly, the locations of every species they planned to exterminate. Colonel, Gomez called out as Vexthul reinforcements finally reached the complex. We've got what we came for. Time to go. Turner's Marines extracted under heavy fire, but they had accomplished something no enemy of the Vexthul had ever managed. They had stolen the Empire's secrets. Meanwhile, the Vexthul fleet was having problems of its own. General Korthak discovered that hyperspace travel to the Sol system was taking much longer than expected. Navigation reports severe gravitational interference, his officer explained. Something is disrupting our jump calculations. What the Vexthul did not know was that human ships had been deploying gravitational mines throughout their projected route for the past week. The mines didn't damage ships, but they forced vessels out of hyperspace at random intervals. Captain Chen's stealth ship shadowed the alien fleet, watching as they were forced to drop out of hyperspace again and again. Each time they stopped, they had to recalculate their route, adding hours to their journey. "Admiral," Chen reported, "the Vexthul fleet is now 18 hours behind schedule. They're getting frustrated and making mistakes." Admiral Clark smiled grimly. "Perfect. How are they handling the delays?" "They're arguing among themselves. I'm intercepting communications between their ship commanders. Some want to split the fleet and attack Earth in waves. Others want to turn back and deal with our attacks on their infrastructure. And General Korthak? He's insisting they stay together and continue to Earth. But his subordinates are starting to question his leadership." This was exactly what Clark had hoped for. The Vexthul Empire was built on the assumption that they would always face weaker enemies. When that assumption proved false, their entire command structure began to crack. The situation got worse for the aliens when they finally reached the Sol system and discovered that Earth was ready for them. Admiral Henry Clark had used the extra time to recall every human warship in the galaxy. The fleet that waited for the Vexthul included not just military vessels but armed merchant ships, converted civilian craft, and even experimental prototypes that had never been tested in combat. "All ships, this is Admiral Clark," he announced as the alien fleet dropped out of hyperspace. "Today we fight not just for Earth but for every species that has fallen to Vexthul genocide. Make them remember this day." General Korthak stared at his tactical display in disbelief. Instead of the small fleet he expected to find, he was facing over 200 human ships arranged in formations he had never seen before. "How did they know we were coming?" he demanded. His intelligence officer checked the reports again. "General, it appears they've been preparing for this battle for weeks. They've had time to position their forces and develop new tactics." What followed was unlike any battle in the history of either species. The Vexthul tried to use their traditional tactics of overwhelming firepower and rigid formations. The humans responded with chaos. Human ships fought in pairs and small groups, never staying in one place long enough for the alien targeting systems to lock on. They used the debris from destroyed vessels as cover and weapons, turning the battlefield itself into a weapon. Captain Williams led a squadron of fast attack ships through the Vexthul formation like wolves hunting among sheep. "Don't try to match their firepower," he told his captains. "Hit them where they're not looking and get out before they can respond." Major Cruz's fighters swarmed around the larger alien ships, targeting their sensor arrays and communication systems. "Blind them first," he ordered. "A ship that can't see is a ship that can't fight." But the most devastating human weapon was something the Vexthul had never encountered before: psychological warfare. Human ships broadcast recordings of the massacre at Kepler's Rest on all frequencies. The aliens heard their own communications filled with panic and confusion as their forces were destroyed. "Attention Vexthul fleet," Admiral Clark announced on the main communication channel. "You came here to commit genocide. Instead, you're going to learn what happens when someone fights back." The battle raged for 8 hours. When it ended, over half the Vexthul fleet had been destroyed or captured. General Korthak's flagship limped away with barely functional engines, carrying the news of defeat back to an empire that had never known failure. The Vexthul homeworld of supremacy had never been attacked in the 3,000 years of the empire's existence. Its massive cities stretched across continents, housing billions of aliens who had grown fat and comfortable on the wealth stolen from conquered worlds. The planet's defenses were designed to inspire fear in visitors, not to repel a serious military assault. Admiral Clark stood on the bridge of his flagship as the human fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the supremacy system. Behind him stretched the largest armada humanity had ever assembled. 200 human warships, 50 captured Vexthul vessels crewed by liberated slaves, and dozens of ships belonging to species that had joined the growing rebellion against the Empire. "My God," whispered Captain Steve Williams as he stared at the tactical display. "Look at the size of those orbital platforms." The defenses around supremacy were enormous, but they had been built to intimidate rather than fight. The Vexthul had never imagined that an enemy fleet would penetrate this deep into their territory. "All ships, this is Admiral Clark. Today we end 3,000 years of genocide. No mercy, no quarter, no prisoners who refused to surrender completely. His voice carried across the fleet with cold determination. Make them understand that the age of the Vexthul Empire is over. The assault began with something the Vexthul had never experienced: a coordinated attack by their former victims. Ships crewed by liberated Kethmari, freed human prisoners, and survivors from a dozen extinct species struck at the outer defensive ring with desperate fury. Veltar commanded one of the captured Vexthul cruisers, his peaceful people transformed into warriors by years of suffering. For Serenity Prime, he broadcast as his ship's weapons tore through an enemy platform. For all the worlds you destroyed, but it was the human ships that carried the real terror. Colonel Frank Turner, now promoted to general, led the ground assault forces with troops who had been fighting the Vexthul for months. His soldiers had seen too much death, committed too much violence, and some of them no longer resembled the humans who had first answered the Kethmari distress call. Remember, Turner told his Marines as they prepared to land on supremacy, the civilians down there spent their lives enjoying the wealth stolen from murdered worlds. Today they pay the bill. Master Sergeant Patricia Gomez led the first wave of landing craft through the planetary defense grid. Her face was hard with an expression that would have frightened her own mother. "General, we have visual on the capital city. Orders?" Turner studied the massive alien metropolis spread out below them. Millions of Vexthul civilians went about their daily lives completely unaware that their empire was crumbling around them. "Take the government district," he ordered. "I want their supreme overlord alive. Everyone else—" Turner paused, weighing his words carefully. "Everyone else is a legitimate target. They built their civilization on genocide. The battle for supremacy raged for 3 days. Human forces fought with a viciousness that shocked even their allies. Streets that had known only peace for millennia became killing fields. Buildings that had stood for centuries were reduced to rubble. Dr. Amy Foster worked frantically in a field hospital, treating both human wounded and Vexthul prisoners. What she saw in the eyes of some human soldiers disturbed her more than their physical injuries. "We're becoming monsters," she told Admiral Clark during a brief communication. "Some of our troops are enjoying this too much. They're not just fighting to win anymore. They're fighting to make the enemy suffer." Clark's response was cold and practical. "Dr. Foster, monsters created monsters. If we have to become something terrible to stop genocide, then that's what we'll become." The end came when General Turner's forces finally reached the Supreme Overlord's palace. The building was a monument to 3,000 years of conquest, filled with treasures stolen from dead civilizations. Now it became the tomb of an empire. Supreme Overlord Vashatar was found cowering in his private chambers, surrounded by the last of his personal guard. The ancient alien who had ordered the deaths of billions trembled as human soldiers dragged him before General Turner. "You cannot do this," Vashatar whispered through the translation device. "I am the ruler of half the galaxy. I am protected by ancient laws, by treaties, by the natural order of things." Turner looked down at the creature who had caused so much suffering. "Your empire is dead. Your fleets are destroyed. Your worlds are in rebellion. You're not a ruler anymore. You're just another war criminal. What do you want?" Vashtar asked, his voice breaking with fear. "I want you to understand something," Turner replied. "Every species you exterminated, every world you destroyed, every life you snuffed out, they all mattered. They all had value. And now you're going to pay for every single one." The trial of Supreme Overlord Vashtar was broadcast across the galaxy. For the first time in 3,000 years, the victims of Vexthul genocide had a voice. Representatives from dozens of species testified about the crimes committed against their people. Admiral Clark presided over the proceedings with cold efficiency. "You stand accused of genocide, war crimes, and crimes against all sentient life. How do you plead?" Vashtar's response revealed everything that was wrong with the Vexthul Empire. "I plead necessity. The galaxy was chaotic, inefficient, filled with inferior species that wasted resources. We brought order. We brought efficiency. If lesser beings had to die to achieve this, that was simply the price of progress." The courtroom fell silent. Even the human judges were shocked by the casual manner in which the alien dismissed the murder of billions. Dr. Lisa Grant stood to deliver the final statement. "Your Honor, the defendant has shown no remorse, no understanding of the magnitude of his crimes, and no recognition that other species have any right to exist. He represents a threat to all life in the galaxy. The verdict was unanimous. Death." But Admiral Clark had one more surprise for the galaxy. Instead of simply executing Vashatar, he announced that the former Supreme Overlord would spend the rest of his life in a prison on Earth, forced to watch as his empire was dismantled piece by piece. Death would be too easy, Clark explained. He's going to live long enough to see everything he built turn to dust. The aftermath of the war revealed the true cost of humanity's victory. The Vexthul Empire was indeed destroyed, but the humans who had accomplished this feat were no longer the same species that had first received the Kethmari distress call. Dr. Foster compiled the final medical reports with growing concern. Admiral, 40% of our combat troops are showing signs of severe psychological trauma. Many of them have difficulty adjusting to peacetime conditions. Some of them seem unable to stop fighting. Commander Samuel Torres nodded grimly. We're getting reports from across human space. Veterans are having trouble reintegrating into civilian life. Some of them are having violent outbursts. A few have requested assignment to permanent combat duty. Admiral Clark studied the reports in his private quarters. Outside his window, Earth looked peaceful and beautiful, but he knew that his homeworld would never be the same. Humanity had proven they could stop genocide, but they had paid a terrible price for that knowledge. Captain Lucy Chen entered with the latest intelligence reports. Admiral, we're receiving distress calls from the Andromeda Galaxy. Apparently there's another empire out there that's been committing genocide for the past 5,000 years. Clark looked up from his reports. Are you suggesting we get involved? Sir, there are billions of innocent beings dying over there. If we don't help them, who will? Admiral Clark was quiet for a long moment. He thought about the humans who had volunteered for this mission, the Kethmari who had been saved, and the price that everyone had paid for justice. Captain, send a message to the Terran Defense Council. Tell them we have new information about threats to galactic peace. Dr. Grant entered the room just as Chen was leaving. Admiral, I've been analyzing the psychological profiles of our veterans. I'm concerned about what we're becoming as a species. Explain. We've proven that humans are uniquely suited for warfare against genocidal enemies. We're adaptable, creative, and absolutely ruthless when we believe we're fighting for a just cause. But that same ruthlessness is changing us. Admiral Clark nodded slowly. Dr. Grant, a year ago we were explorers dreaming of peaceful contact with alien civilizations. Today we're the species that other races call when they need someone to stop genocide. The question is whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know, Grant admitted. But I know that every species in this galaxy sleeps a little safer now, because they know we exist. Clark activated his communication system and opened a channel to Fleet Command. This is Admiral Clark. Prepare the fleet for extended operations. We're establishing the Terran Defense Coalition with a simple mandate. Any species that commits genocide will answer to us. As he spoke those words, Clark realized that humanity had found its place in the galaxy. They would not be explorers or traders or diplomats. They would be the monsters that protected the innocent from other monsters. Veltar, now serving as an ambassador for the liberated Kethmari, had requested a final meeting with Admiral Clark before the human fleet departed for Andromeda. Admiral, the old alien said through his translator,